to a Hope 1032 podcast.
Mum, worry is a waste of time. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, if that's not a gift for a 19-year-old to have the wisdom to tell her mother that, what is? Do it afraid is another one of the gifts. I've brought that part up in, we're never not going to be afraid. Yeah. I'm never not afraid. As a Christian, I'm told not to be afraid. I still look at those verses in the Bible and go, I'm sorry, I can't not be afraid. I'm human. But what can I do afraid?
Yeah. Hello, friends. I'm Colette Smart, psychologist, teacher, and author, and it's so good to have you here on the Raising Teens podcast. I have such hope for this generation of teens, and so if you're navigating the ups and downs of life with teens and tweens, you've come to the right place. My guests and I are here to share practical, science-backed tips to support you and your family today. Don't forget to subscribe and then join me on my Instagram and Facebook, and let's help this generation thrive together. You will recognize our guest this week, Raewyn Elsegood. Raewyn has been a guest on our podcast before, and today she's talking about her book, 21 Gifts, and her own journey through grief. Raewyn is an Aussie, she's a wife, mother of 3 from Sydney, and she finds her passion in chaplaincy, writing and speaking, and the moment a piece of chocolate melts in her mouth. Hello, Raewyn. Welcome back to the Raising Teens podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Colette. It's a joy.
I'm so happy that you're back. A lot of our listeners won't know, but your previous podcast episode, because we've had you on before, is one of our most listened to and most downloaded episodes on the whole podcast. And so for those listeners, if you haven't heard it before, please go and listen to Raewyn's first podcast episode that she was on with us. But you don't need to listen to that first. This is going to be just as beautiful, just in the way that Raewyn is going to share her heart. I've spent quite a bit of time with Raewyn over the last few years in other professional capacities. Raewyn, I've just watched your journey and your whole journey was quite raw and new at that stage. So just for some of our listeners who haven't heard your story before, I'd love you just to give us a brief view of what they need to know about you before we go into this week's episode.
Sure. That's very, very kind, and I'm in awe of what technology can do to get our voices to people that wouldn't normally find us. When we spoke previously on your podcast, I was enmeshed in my grief of the loss of my 19-year-old daughter. I think we were talking about a year after, and I was only just discovering myself. Grief is very messy. And as a chaplain, I had controlled it for the first year of my journey. And into year 2, it got seriously messy because I surrendered to it. And I think most of us don't realise, even trained professionals, that when it's personal, you can rely on your strengths and your experience for as long as you can, but then you really need to surrender and let your body, your mind and your spirit sort of take over and take each moment at a time. With Amy, she was 19 when she passed. She's one of 3 of my children, and she passed away with aplastic anemia in 2021.
Yeah, thank you so much for being transparent and vulnerable on that podcast. And all the other times I've seen you since, I've just watched your journey, Raewyn, and it's come to this place where you've written a book. And so since our last chat, tell us a little bit about the moment that first inspired you to begin writing your book, which is called 21 Gifts. How did this writing process come to be part of your healing journey?
Yeah, well, as I just said, it got messy, year 2, which meant it was very hard for me to process on a daily basis. She was turning 21, and I was really grappling with how do I do the next 20-odd days leading up to her second anniversary, knowing that she would have been 21, all her friends or my friends' parents were talking about their daughters having their 21st birthdays, and I would just quietly walk out of the room because it got really hard. And I gave myself permission to experience that hard and walk away from moments that were impossible to comprehend. But one of the things that I was having the most trouble with was getting out of bed each morning. And so I gave myself a strategy because as a chaplain, I know that having strategies works. And so I sat down and went, unbeknownst to me, it was exactly 21 days until her anniversary. And I thought, well, how fitting, 21 days. For the next 21 days to get out of bed, I'm going to find one gift that I feel like I've learnt or been given by her and her life in her 19 years. And I'm going to push myself to write it on social media. And I even gave myself a time between 6 and 9 a.m. in the morning. And I just loved, with my faith, I felt like God turned up in a big way and helped give me a bit of a vision for, if I look back in her life, what legacy would I want to grab a hold of? And they became a gift to get me out of bed each morning for that 21 days. And believe it or not, there was no pre-programming, no pre-questions to read. It was just to get up. How do I feel? What did I learn? And write it. And it was in a sentence on Facebook for 21 days. What I didn't do was look at the comments because it wasn't about people's responses. It was about what I needed to do to survive. And then I started getting text messages from friends going, I really loved gift. Would I be able to send that to my family? I really loved gift 21. That's really helped me in my own grief. Then I had all my writer friends, because I've been a trained writer for the last 10 years without publishing a book. And all of a sudden that skill set came into play because my writer friends said, Raewyn, if you write no story, this is a story you must write.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden I realised that I had been writing for the last 2 years myself in journals, but I had never looked at what the gift was in it. I'd been writing from my pain.
There's so much in there that you touch on. The first one that stands out to me is how you spoke about before, and I know you deal with and unpack in your book, but how the healing journey is different and it's different for everyone, and how it's not this clean, neat process, the kind of stages of grief where over your first year, you'll be towards the end of it, and by your second year, you're almost through it. You talk about how your second year almost became more challenging in some ways. And the second thing is that I have such distinct memories of the time you started putting those on Facebook, because both our daughters are the same age, and listeners will know that from the first episode. Our daughters played netball together, and I have such memories of that time because I was aware that my daughter was turning 21, and I remember those gifts you started putting up on social media. They were really moving gifts, and it's fascinating, even as someone who hadn't lost a child, for me, there was some that really spoke to my heart. And I remember that journey. And I also remember being with you at a writers' conference and you talking about where you felt your journey was going. You didn't have any kind of title at that stage, and you were really just starting to talk through that. So it almost felt like the most natural thing when you said to me, I'm using those 21 gifts and that's become my book. It was like, yes, it seems just so right. It was just the right thing in the right time. What I love about your book, because I've read an early copy, is the structure of those three distinct voices. Where you have your daughter's voice, which you call a daughter's dance, a mother's tribute, which is your mother's heart, and a chaplain's reflection, which is your professional hat on. Tell us a bit about why you chose this unique format and how each voice serves the reader. I have my own views on how magnificent it is, but tell us about your process. How does this work for you?
It was a surprising process in grief. I think, excuse my croaky, it was a surprising process because I sat down and went, what am I to do to flesh these out? And the first thing I did was collect all of my things from the last few years, put them in a box and just start flicking through them. And of course, the first thing as a mum you put on the top is her funeral service program. So we called it a celebration of life. We didn't have a casket there. For my beliefs, it was she's in heaven. I want to celebrate. And that's what we did. I had an epiphany in that moment of, oh my goodness, I'm looking at the structure of the program of how we'd honoured her. And I started writing what I thought from the 21 gifts within the structure of the program of the funeral service. It was the most unusual thing I've ever done as a writer. And I sat there and went, oh my gosh, Amy's voice is in the accolade we gave her at the funeral. The tributes, became our family's heart and what we'd learnt from her life. And when the minister got up and gave the message on John 3:16, it was absolutely fitting that my chaplain heart then removed myself from what the voice of my daughter and the voice of me as a mother, and nearly hovered over the hospital bed and looked at the both of us and said, what am I reflecting on in this observation right now? So I actually chose to write Amy's voice first so that I did not mess with her point of view, because I'd spent so much time with her over 7 months in hospital because it was during COVID. I was the only one allowed in most of the time. So we got deep with our discussions. And when she was first diagnosed, she said to me, I know you're going to write about this, but you're not the patient. You need to have your own point of view. And so it actually defined my journey then of, I can't incorporate Amy's and my voice together. I have to keep them separate. Otherwise, I'll hear her yelling from heaven. So it was one of those therapeutic processes to separate our voices. But then it was the chaplain. Now, I rewrote all my chaplain spaces in each of the gifts a year and a half later after writing the Amy and the mother sections. I needed to remove myself, so I went through a process of writing from my pain. Then I rewrote everything from a perspective of how I'd healed through those moments. And then I had to rewrite it from how would I be helpful and how do I take my voice out so it helps the reader. And that's when I realised that the inside of people's journey, they might just read Amy's section. If they're in a hurting place right now, they might not need to read what the chaplain has to say or the mother. They just might want to identify with Amy. And in the book, that section is very obvious. You could flick through each gift and just read hers. And you could read a crossways in each of the gifts and just get something from her voice. And I think that will help those that are in a different place than I was and a different age. Amy was 19. I'm in my 50s. They're going to not want to hear what a mother has to say. Someone might want to hear what the 19-year-old had to say. So I feel like there's something in there for everyone, no matter what they're grieving and no matter how old they are.
And I think that's what stood out to me, how magnificent that is, that this is a book that will speak across age groups because you have all these different voices and also people across their stages and places in grief because of you talking about your raw pain from the mother's perspective, also from the person who has passed or the person who's not well, their perspective of what's going on, and then the professional's perspective. And I know you have a lot of experience in terms of working with people. I know you were down in Bondi recently working with people, particularly who wanted to know how to talk to their children and how to process grief. So you've got a wealth of experience professionally, but your own personal experience is really what's going to resonate with the readers who want to know, how do I do this in my really raw grief when it's painful and that's all I can see? Mm-hmm. In your 21 gifts, you've described it as a sacred in your 21 gifts, you described it as a sacred dance through grief and healing. What does that metaphor mean for you personally?
It's a big one. When I first wrote the book, I didn't have the metaphor of dance through it. I was trying to work out who might want to print my book. So it's interesting that every stage of becoming an author, you learn things on the journey and you're also directed and guided. And so in searching for publication over in America with literary agents and traditional publishers and working out whether I was meant to self-publish, one of the things I did was try to keep it so neutral that anyone might want to pick it up and I could rewrite into what they needed. And then I realised when I went to America that I was actually meant to be writing it my way and be true to my mother's heart. And however that landed in publication would be the way it was meant to be revealed to the public. And so I put the whole metaphor of dance in it because Amy was an elite dancer. And so she has danced all her life. She played netball, of course, but netball gave her the courage she needed to be a dancer. When you learn to blow an umpire's whistle really strongly from a little meek mouse, you actually learn confidence. And people cheering you on the sideline, training you to do that, helps you walk into quite a world that is quite judgmental on how you need to perform, how you need to look and what's needed. And so she walked into the dance space very passionate, and it became not her identity, but where I saw her come alive in her true self. Whenever she was on stage, she became an extroverted performer. But when she was off stage, she was an introvert that stayed quite to herself. And so I was surprised as a mother what her creative side could bring out in her. And so again, that's something I learnt to do within my writing. I'm an extrovert who loves to speak, but I'm a chaplain who is privileged to listen. How do I put those two things together on paper when I'm used to just using my voice in a speaking context? So there was a whole challenge in how to do that, but Amy's dancing helped me find the movement I needed, and it helped me find the metaphor to be able to bring grief alive for people who need to understand that joy and sorrow can coexist. And how do we do that? We move with it. And if movement is dance, then grief can become a dance partner.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. And that's so honoring to Amy, really. What a beautiful analogy. So I mentioned how you worked with or went down and helped support the community in Bondi. I know you've supported many communities. In your work as a chaplain, what are the lessons from your professional work that shaped your chaplain voice in your book?
Yeah, this is probably what happened to me in my first year of grief, really highlighted this for me. What did I need from people in my own grief versus what I would do as a chaplain previously? And it really helped me find the voice of a chaplain within this storytelling over my daughter's situation, because we're trained as a chaplain that presence is everything. Our job is to bear witness to people's pain, to not come in with theology, to not come in with an answer, but to actually bear witness and say, I'm just here to sit next to you. I'm here. It's the best thing you can say to anyone. Turn up and say, I'm here. And I think that has come out in, I want people who are reading this book to feel seen and heard. I want them to have an I'm here moment when they read this, because I believe that I've written it as a companion to their grief so that they don't feel so isolated and alone. Because in grief, the biggest thing that people feel is no one else is feeling what I'm feeling, and I feel alone in it. Not lonely, because they might be surrounded by a lot of other people. And people might not understand when they say, I feel alone, but it's no one feels like you, because no one's had the relationship with that person the way you did. And I think that has really helped me form then the rituals that I needed in relation to routine within my own life. And I used the word sacred because a pure thing in chaplaincy training is creating a sacred pause before you create the sacred space.
All right. Unpack that for me.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where Before I walked into Amy's room in hospital, because she was in hospital for 7 months on and off, but generally she was there for about 4 months in one chunk and then 8 weeks in another chunk. And during COVID, I was the only one in, so you've got to gown up, and she was isolated. And I was so afraid going in on my own. We all would like to have a person that's supporting us when we're supporting somebody else. And yet I had to walk in alone, sometimes at midnight, because I'd been called in to a turn she was having or she'd been taken to IC. And I would do what I'd call my sacred pause, and I now call it my doorway ritual. And I stand at a door before I walk in, and I take 3 deep breaths, and with each breath, I release my fear. And I go looking for more than one, because generally there is, so I can get it out of my system before I walk in to be the biggest cheerleader I could be for the person I'm supporting, because we wear our grief and our concern on our faces when we support people in grief. And the last thing they need is that pity face. You know, I've seen so many cancer survivors in hospital go, oh my gosh, everyone just walks in with that pity face or a relieved face of thank God it's not me.
Yeah.
We wear things on our face. So being able to stand at a door and release the fears that whatever the other person you're supporting is bringing up for you. And it could even be that you've had someone else pass, you know, a few months before, and you're bringing that to this doorway before you walk in, because one grief lands on top of the other and then becomes complex. How do you release that before you walk in and be in the moment and stand with this person and bring that vulnerable strength that they really need?
Incredible. And so is that in terms of your navigating your writing and all this personal painful experience, when you talk about this pause, is that part of how you offer encouragement to others? I'm almost trying to work out how you separate your two roles, your mother and your chaplain, or are both of them in there now in your work with people?
Yeah, another phrase that we often use in chaplaincy is called holding space. So I like to put different hats on at different times for different reasons. They all are inside of me, but sometimes I have to remove one of them. So when I was writing the chaplain part, I removed the mother. And I said, right now, I can't be your mum, Amy. I need to be, what would Chaplain Raewyn say to this person if she was supporting a mother and a daughter who had gone through this? And that's why I had to remove the writing and have it at a separate, nearly a year later. I think having permission from Amy really helped me to separate my voice, like I said before, when she said, right when she was diagnosed, you've got permission to write, not knowing that she would die. She just was giving me permission to write because she knew I would do it as a therapeutic means to help myself. But she also was giving permission when on my Facebook, where these 21 gifts were born, when she was diagnosed, we had a choice to make. Do we isolate ourselves and keep this within our family because we can't cope with anybody else's responses, or do we send it out to the world and ask for support? And particularly as Christians, we were asking for prayer support. And I was very honoured in that moment of, within half an hour of her diagnosis, was 2 weeks into our 7-month journey, she said, Mum, you've got all this network of friends on Facebook. I want them to know. I want them praying for me. And they became prayer warriors in this journey. And hence, that's why I went to in posting the 21 gifts that I ended up in that second year. That's why I was drawn to Facebook, because our army was already there waiting. And every time I told them how I was doing, they would breathe a sigh of relief, because we all worry and we all don't know what to do to support our people. Yeah. And generally, we're all in for that first few weeks, and we're all in maybe for that first 6 weeks. But what happens when it's 5 years later? Yeah. I need the same support that I got in the first few weeks now. My loss and my pain have not subsided in the least. I'm just finding different strategies to live life because her journey and my journey are now intertwined. And so I live to be a legacy for her. But I also live to be a mother for my other 2 children, a wife for my husband. And I have beautiful friends that keep me laughing.
Yeah. And I so appreciate whenever I hear you speak, you are very honest and open about how grief is still with you all the time. And that's
Mm.
so important for people to hear, because you're absolutely right how, and I've caught myself doing that, where you think after a year somebody should be at a different place in a sense. And I mean, they are in a different place. You're talking about how you are in a different place, but your grief is still as big, in the sense of Amy was your daughter. She was part of your life. That's not gone.
Mm.
And I love that you're really honest about that. And it makes me think about how I talk to people when they have lost someone that they loved 10 years ago,
Yes.
because it makes me remember it's still as important to them now as it was. And I love how you keep saying Amy, you keep saying her name. And I had a friend who lost a daughter, who at one point I just used her daughter's name. This was before you and I had even met or spoken. And she said to me, "Thank you so much for saying her name. No one says her name anymore." And that
Yes.
struck me then. And so that was a small lesson I learned. I'm still learning lessons from you about how we can be gentle and kind with people who have lost loved ones, and not expect them to just fit into this neat package of the stages of grief that we sometimes used to learn about.
Yeah, I read Atlas of the Heart by Brené Brown once and went, oh my goodness, this makes so much sense. Are there really 3,000 emotions?
Yeah.
And we try to package everything down into stages and, oh, you should be at this stage now. Or surely there's just anger. Or surely there's just confusion. Or surely there's 100 words that come with that one emotion. And someone's been brave enough to speak them out and say, gosh, if there's over 3,000 emotions, I'll be going through this for a very long time. And it changes your perspective of, after a year, you should be doing this. Or surely after 5 years, you should have taken their things out of their bedroom by now. No.
Yeah.
No, not necessarily. You know, with us with stages, it's been, my husband went through it. My husband, myself and my son live here in the home with me. And everybody grieves differently, but then you've got to live together within that grief. Oh my gosh, that's hard.
Wow.
Because I want to speak. Words of affirmation are my love language. But my boys, my husband and my son, did not want to talk at all. Hence, the writing was my therapy and became my lifeline when I can't talk. I'm going to wear my friends out if I keep talking about it and using the way I want to be loved in the situation. My husband wanted to be loved through tasks, so he went out into our garden and people kept giving us rose bush upon rose bush. So now we have a rose garden. We've just had Valentine's Day here, and up came a beautiful 12 roses from Amy's rose garden for Valentine's Day for me. He's showing love and I'm being seen by him in different ways when words sometimes just don't speak as loud. My husband went through his hardest year the first year. I went through my hardest year the second year, and my son came out of denial and went through his hardest year in the third year. Mm-hmm. Right now, we're entering into our fifth year, and for the first time, we all sat at the dinner table celebrating my son's 21st birthday in this last year. Because that's one thing we could not do together, was come together as a family and sit at a table that was missing.
That's such a powerful story. And you know, when you and I spoke recently with someone really well known, I won't say who they are on here, but it will become obvious because we all speak together on Channel 9 at some stage. But we were speaking with this person how they shared on the program how they had wanted to just give away the clothes of the person or people who had passed away, and their partner had not. It was like this interesting, just like you've explained how all of you in your own home experienced or processed grief differently. It struck me because I hadn't heard this person tell that story before about how they initially had just gone into absolute I don't want to remember anything. I want to give away everything, that it's just gone and forgotten tomorrow. And the other partner was kind of, I'm paraphrasing, but what on earth are you thinking?
Yes.
It's so, I've learned more and more in my journey with you and connections that I've had through you and other people, how different grief is to what I ever was taught as a psychologist. You've taught me as a psychologist how to respond better to people. And I really appreciate that from just being your friend and being your colleague. Tell me a little bit about, I'm going to ask you now something about your faith. You're a person of faith. You have a faith. Some listeners who might be listening, they might be thinking, how on earth do you reconcile faith with deep loss? What would you say to someone who feels abandoned by God in their grief?
I would say that your feelings are valid. I felt that. I have a faith. Faith is one of my highest spiritual gifts. I never stopped believing that God was underneath me, beside me, in the moment, but I doubted I didn't get the answer I wanted. I didn't get the prayer I prayed, but did my daughter has become my question. So she prayed with me. All she wanted to do was dance again. Now, her condition was probably where she landed with aplastic anemia, never going to allow her to dance again. But with her faith, she could dance in heaven. So as a mother, in over these 4 or 5 years of reflection, I have gone, did she actually get her prayer answered? And is that, in fact, the prayer I should have been praying all along? Because selfishly, I wanted her to survive. For me, no mother wants their child to go, regardless of how they land. But gradually, her bone marrow transplant was very successful. For those that are listening that have encountered severe aplastic anemia before, you could live on a full life after a bone marrow transplant with medical intervention quite well. But it's the complications that come around that can steal a person from you. And in Amy's case, it was the CMV virus that came and took over her body and bit by bit was stealing all her organs until she was ventilated. And up until that point, we were fighting a good fight, and we believed death was not on the cards at all. So it wasn't until the last 10 days in this 7-month journey that death became our reality. And as parents, we had to flip the switch and go, hang on a minute, this is now a battle of life and death, not what's the next step to her recovery. So in my faith, we took the best thing. My psychologist that I've been seeing somebody probably every 6 to 8 weeks for the first 2 or 3 years. And it's only just started to dribble to quarterly now, but I have my chaplaincy supervision anyway. And one of the things she asked me to do as a Christian with my faith was, if you believe in Jesus, then where is he in the room? In all the hard moments, especially the one where we had to put her on ventilation and I was there on my own and we battled her climbing Mount Everest for 6 hours. That is something that made my nightmares come alive after her death, and I couldn't get to sleep because of them, or I'd wake up sweating and crying out in the night, and I was looking for a way for that to stop. And the question that I got from the psychologist was, where was Jesus in the room? Because do you want to get rid of that memory? Because that memory helps you understand why she's gone, how serious it was. If you take that away, then it confuses you. Where if I can find a way to make peace with that moment, it then became manageable and has become a highlight, because I was able to see Jesus in the room of each of the 17 rooms that she lived in over that 7 months. But this one room that I battled the hardest with, it took me a while to find him. And the reason I couldn't find him was he was underneath us. And the beautiful vision that I got was his everlasting arms coming underneath us, and he had in one hand Amy and one hand me, and he was rocking us. And what I had been doing in that 6 hours while she climbed Mount Everest with her lungs failing, she asked me to hum Jesus Loves Me to her. And so for 6 hours I hummed. I cannot sing to save my life, but It's what she wanted, so it's what you do. I held her hand, and for 6 hours we fought together with me humming that song because it was her childhood lullaby. That vision now is written in my book because it became a vital healing moment for me to understand in my faith where was God. He was my companion. He had never left me, but sometimes I can't feel or see him. But if I reflect back, it will become evident that he was always present as a companion. He just didn't turn up to intercede the way that I had hoped.
Thank you, Raewyn. I want to ask you then, what are some of the most surprising gifts? And I use the word gifts because your book is 21 gifts.
Yes.
Some of the most surprising gifts that emerged from your loss of Amy. What are those moments that were unexpected for you?
Yeah, I think Amy's defiance. She was 19, so she was sassy with us. She had just moved out of home 9 weeks before this occurred, and so she was fighting for her independence. So all the way through hospital, she had this real playful defiance. And so I ended up using that, became one of the gifts that came out of the book. But I then went, if Amy did that, I can learn from that. And what can I do? And the hardest thing I was doing was people were asking me to speak about this, including yourself. And I went, how do I find the courage to do this? I need a strategy to go in and nearly bare arms like the soldier that I felt like I was. And I couldn't literally hold a sword in front of me. But I found out from Amy's closest friend that she was flatmating with was that her favourite colour when she needed to find confidence when she went for a dance audition, she would wear red. And so at her funeral, we then had red roses, and I was with my daughter who lives in New York, and we were shopping, and I found red underwear. And I went, oh, if I wore red and people couldn't see me wearing red, I'm going to walk in with my own confidence, but no one's going to know that I'm being confident. And so it became my secret superpower that I wear red underwear when I need courage. Now, that playful defiance is how I walk boldly into places now. And then when I had to speak in the US last year and talk about Amy and searching for publication for this book, I had to stand in.
I was going to ask you to tell the story. Tell the story.
I had to stand in front of a crowd of 600 people and say what I was writing about, and it was genre dress-up night, and they said, well, you need to dress as your book. And I went, oh, I'm not dressing as a dancer. I can't dance. But I had a good friend, who had heard my fear of taking this trip, and she said, well, you'll need 10 pairs of red undies to cope with that sort of courage. And next week in the mail arrived a huge giant pair of big girl pants, bright red satin, that virtually comes up to my neck. But it was the 10 pairs of undies put in my big girl pants on. And so I stood in front of these 600 people and put my big girl pants on in front of them and said, I'm taking the red from inside and I'm not hiding it anymore. I found a publisher on that trip. And I feel like part of the red undie story is I empowered myself enough to take the risk in my fear as a mother, because this story being rejected is not what a grieving mother needs, but I was protected by my own playful defiance.
And if any of our listeners want to see that picture, I know it's on your social media, it's on your website.
Yes.
You're actually on stage with this huge, it looks like elephant underwear.
Yes.
Give our listeners a picture. This huge elephant pair of satin underwear over Raewyn's clothes, pulled up over her clothes, kind of like a magnified version of Captain Underpants. I don't know how. It's just magnificent. And when I first saw that image, I had no idea what I was even looking at until I heard the story. And it's just, I love that. That's the playfulness and that playful defiance. That's such an Amy picture all over your website.
It is. And I actually have a gift called Wear Confidence, as well as a gift in the book called Playful Defiance. So it's the two in separate contexts. But the thing that I have learnt about being a mother that has lost a child. And I'm going to read this because I want to say it right. Losing Amy didn't mean losing my purpose as her mother. Writing 21 gifts, establishing her scholarship, speaking to others. This is mothering her legacy.
Amazing. So I'd love you to just give us a small picture of a few. You've mentioned 2. What else? You don't have to list all 21. Just give us a picture for the listeners who don't have the book yet. What are some of the gifts that you give us in that book?
It starts with home is where your story begins. So many of us search for our stories outside of our own family, and yet the most powerful stories come from who we were as children, the people that we love in our lives. And I think it's a saying that we've heard many, many times, but are we actually living it out? And is that where our story begins? What I know when nothing feels sure is gift 2. It's surrounded by uncertainty and grief. And yet we forget that we've already had experiences before that might help us with strategies of what to do now. I knew when Amy went to hospital that my eldest daughter that lives in New York now, she had a 3rd-degree burn on her hands when she was 1, and I had lived 9 months in hospital with her. And so when Amy had her diagnosis and we were trapped in hospital for many, many months, I went, hang on a minute, I've done this before. I'm still here. We still survived it. My daughter is now a nurse at 31 years of age in the States. I wonder if that had anything to do with it. And it makes you reflect and think, yes, my story probably starts at home and happened, and who I am now pivots back to childhood and the things that I have learned as an adult as I've been training. I think one of my favourites is worry is a waste of time. Now, as a doctor, a GP would be very quick to say, but worry's normal. You can't say it's a waste of time. Well, we can all worry. Worry is normal, but it is a waste of time. It's not necessary. We become so anxious about the things that we're uncertain about that we let fear take over. And Amy actually said that statement to me on the day of her grandfather's funeral because my father passed away 8 weeks before she did. And so she was diagnosed with this CMV virus on the day of my father's funeral. And it was during COVID and we could only have 10 people attend his service. She was going to watch it online with her sister from New York. And I was running around, I've got to do a eulogy for my dad. You're being sent back to hospital. I don't know what to do. And she sat on our couch and said, Mum, worry is a waste of time. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, if that's not a gift for a 19-year-old to have the wisdom to tell her mother that, what is? Do it afraid is another one of the gifts. I've brought that part up in, we're never not going to be afraid.
Yeah.
I'm never not afraid. As a Christian, I'm told not to be afraid. I still look at those verses in the Bible and go, I'm sorry, I can't not be afraid. I'm human. But what can I do afraid?
Yeah.
And then that gives you the courage to step in anyway. So that's just a little taste.
Thank you. Now, what encouragement then, Raewyn, would you offer to friends and family who want to support someone who's grieving, but they just don't know what to say?
I might write a whole nother book on this topic, Colette, I think.
I think that's the next one coming.
Yeah, it's people don't, in our fear, we stay away in the fear of not knowing what to do and the fear of saying the wrong thing. But there's no perfect words. So if I could tell listeners, please just show up, but show up in the way that you normally would to this relationship. So if you were someone standing on the netball sidelines and that's the only place you see that person, wait till you see them again there. You can send them a text, but don't show up on their door if you've never done that before. Show up in the way that your relationship has been. So if you've ever got a query about, should I text them? Oh, hang on a minute, I don't have their mobile number. Or don't text them. Don't go searching for their phone number to text them. Are they on Facebook? Send a Facebook message. Are they on whatever social media you are connected with? You can send a message through that. Don't go seeking for new ways because you weren't in relationship with that person in that way. If you are family, may I say, You have to put your big girl pants on, whether you're a male or female, and hop, scoot it and show up for your people. This is when family means everything, no matter about rifts, problems, no one will care. Show up. Even if just don't be afraid of being rejected. You might have shown up an hour too early, sometimes an hour too late, but don't have that regret when you're 80 and you're looking back on your life. I should have. You want to deal with it when it's happening, not deal with it when you're 80 and thinking about, why is my family not talking to me? Staying the long game when we've talked about the fact that, please ask me about Amy 5 years later. She will be my favourite topic of discussion. People that are having a hard moment, just allow them the privilege of saying, oh, I'd love to go to coffee with you next week and talk about it. Today's just a harder day. By them saying no doesn't mean no forever. It just means no right now because of what they might be experiencing. And I think witnessing that mess is really, really helpful for people. I need friends that can sit with me and watch me sob. I have a lot of organised friends because I'm a very organised person, but I have one person that loves messy. She's my favourite person to call when I'm in my most messiest moments because I know that she won't reject me. I know that she'll just turn up in moments.
Yeah. Raewyn, I usually end with a question on hope, but I've actually got another question that I want to end with after this. So I'm going to make this the exception, and this is our second last question.
Okay.
If our listeners want to remember one truth from 21 Gifts when they read it, what is your hope for them?
So Amy's last words that we found in her journal were, you are the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. How fortuitous, not knowing she would die, to make a statement like that and for me to find it reading through her journals. That brought me great companionship with her, like a connection with her. And I think what I want people to be able to feel as they read this book is they're walking with a companion. And I want them to have hope in their hurting heart. I want them to have courage to keep dancing with grief, but one step at a time. And I've spread out the gifts in the book with reflective questions, with a prayer and a blessing at the end of each one, and a big, beautiful dancing title page that stops you between each gift, because I want you to be able to dance slowly with each one and reflect on each one and work out, what is it right now that I'm meant to hear? And I hope people take pen to this book and write all over it, their grief, and pour out their feelings, because as a chaplain and as a mother of someone that has lost someone so close to them, I want you to feel heard, I want you to feel seen, and I want you to feel like you're not alone.
That then brings me to the final, it's not really a question. I actually would like you to read something in Amy's words. I feel like the most fitting thing to do is actually have Amy's voice.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
I want her to finish this episode.
Oh, you're going to make me cry. This is the first gift because I feel like as a mother-daughter, the home part it's not my favourite gift, but it's the most powerful, I think, in Amy setting us all up for looking at the character of the person that we've loved and the legacy that that person that they've loved might carry forward in their own life. And this is an excerpt from A Daughter's Dance, Amy's story in the first gift, Home is Where Your Story Begins. And it says, it had only been a week post-diagnosis. Determined to be heard, she sat up between the crisp white linen of her hospital bedsheets, this sterile stage where she would choreograph her own narrative. Mama, you can write about me, you are going to anyway, but only if you use your own point of view. You are not the patient in my story. Amy's gaze pierced through the confining glass windows of the top floor haematology unit, leaving no room for discussion. Even here, she commanded her performance with grace.
Thank you, Raewyn.
Thank you, Colette, for that privilege.
If you or your teen have lost someone and found this topic brings up emotions that you'd like to work through, please reach out to Lifeline. In Australia, it's 13 11 14 or your local helpline wherever you are around the world. Otherwise, contact your GP who can help you find the best support services for you and your family. To get a copy of Raewyn's book, 21 Gifts, A Sacred Dance Through Grief and Healing, you can go to her website, raewynelsegood.com/21 Gifts book. But something special is also happening this week, and that is from the 17th to the 30th of March. The book will be available for 99 US cents as an online copy, with the paperback coming out on the 31st of March. There will be a link on our website in the show notes below for that. And then this weekend, Raewyn has a book launch happening. It's a book launch celebration on the 20th of March at 7 p.m. in Sydney's Northwest. It's not your typical book launch. It's kind of like what Raewyn calls a sacred gathering for friends, family, and anyone wanting to celebrate, but also learn to dance with grief. It's a celebration of life, legacy, and the unexpected gifts that emerge from deepest losses. You can join author and chaplain Raewyn Elsegood as she shares the profound story of her daughter Amy. It's a free event and it's open to anyone, but it's limited to 450 seats. So RSVP is appreciated, please. There's a link in the podcast show notes below. There's plenty of free parking on site and the venue is fully wheelchair accessible. And if you're wanting to know how to dress, the dress is smart casual.
You can also find me at raisingteens.au. And if you have a question about raising your teen, please contact me via email or my social media pages at Colette Smart, or you can go to the Hope 1032 podcast page. Please share this episode with your friends and subscribe and review wherever you get your podcasts. This helps others to find us. See you next time, and in the meantime, keep parenting with your teen's future adult in mind.
Hope 1032. Thanks for listening.